please. Okay. Welcome, everybody, to the League of Women Voters of the Pennsylvania Capital Region presentation this evening with Tony Crocamo from Fair Districts, Pennsylvania Executive Committee. This is entitled A Team Approach to Lobbying Legislators. And I, for one, am very excited to have Tony Crocamo here with us. Tony is a volunteer with Fair Districts, Pennsylvania, or FDPA, which is a financial project of the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania, consisting of a coalition of nonpartisan citizens and organizations seeking to reform Pennsylvania's redistricting process to make it impartial, transparent, and accountable. Following a 30-year career of providing marketing services for international engineering and design firms, Tony now presents educational programs on gerrymandering and redistricting reform and instructs volunteers on how to lobby state legislators. A rostered teaching artist with the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts, Tony and his wife, Christine, live in Lancaster County. Today's political discourse has become polarized and fraught. Political discussions can quickly become unpleasant. Today's program will give you the tools needed to make every lobbying visit effective, respectful, and productive. Perhaps you judge that some legislators are lost causes, so distant from our point of view that we think speaking with them would be a waste of time. It isn't, because during today's program, you will learn a non-confrontational, values-based team approach to lobbying that strives to create a working relationship with legislators regardless of their politics. Several years ago, Fair Districts, Pennsylvania adapted this process from the Quakers lobbying organization, the Friends Committee on National Legislation, or FCNL. Dozens of Fair Districts, Pennsylvania lobbying teams have used this process to meet with scores of Pennsylvania legislators. During each visit, we share an issue that is important to us and ask the legislator to take a specific action to further our cause. We are respectful, prepared, and interested in what they have to say about our quest. Today's program is entitled A Team Approach to Lobbying Legislators. Please welcome Tony Crocamo.
Oh, thank you very much. And we'll get started right away here. I want to talk about the benefits of lobbying as a team. And one of the benefits, of course, is shared responsibilities. You have mutual support. You have team members there. You know what the meeting is going to be about. You know who is going to say what, when. You're prepared. And you have built-in backup. You don't have to worry about something important being left out, something you wanted to say, and you get out of the meeting and you slap yourself in the forehead and say, oh, I meant to tell him this, I meant to tell her that. Because you have team members there, and the important things will get covered. There are 5 advocacy team roles. Now, an advocacy team, as defined for lobby visits that we're talking about today, can be 3 to 5 people. Obviously, if you have 3 people, some have multiple roles. You have a captain for the lobby team. The captain is basically the MC for the team. He or she controls the meeting. Then you have a scheduler. The scheduler is the sole point of contact with the legislative office that you are contacting. You don't want 2 or 3 people from the team contacting the legislator. You want one person to do it. Then you have a note taker. And this is a nice little position. If you have a member who wants to do lobbying but doesn't really want to take part verbally, they may be a little bit shy, or don't have the confidence to partake in a discussion, that's fine. They can be a note taker. They don't even have to talk. You just say hello, and that's about it. Then you have storytellers. 1 to 3 people, members of your team, will tell a story. We call it a "what brought me here" story. That is a values-based story. It's 1 to 2 minutes long of why this issue that you're meeting with the legislator on, why the issue is important to you. And then researchers. All the team members are researchers, and you're doing research on the legislator, and you're looking for things that make you similar to rather than different from the legislator. One thing you want to have is at the beginning of the meeting, you want to thank the legislator for something. So everybody does research on the legislator, and maybe there was a comment the legislator made in a recent newsletter, or a bill the legislator has put forth, or the legislator did something at a local school. You want to find something you can thank the legislator for. Occasionally, you may have a difficult legislator, and it is hard for you to find something you can truly thank that legislator for. In that case, you thank him or her for the time they're giving you to meet. So those are the roles in a team. Now, there are 5 people on this call. That is enough for a team. And say you 5 were going to form a team to lobby the legislator on a topic. Okay, you form a team and you have a meeting, and at the meeting you designate the roles, and you use that handout that was made available, and I will upload it into the chat before the end of the meeting. And it's the roadmap, the lobby visit roadmap. And you use that form to designate the roles. The person that's a scheduler after that first meeting will call the office and get a date, place, time, and the duration of the meeting. It takes, my experience is it takes, maybe 4 to 5 days to get a response, sometimes as long as a week. And the meeting is typically within 2 weeks of that. So you can assume the meeting is going to be 3 weeks or so after your initial meeting, where you designate the roles and figure out who's doing what. Create a meeting file. Now, I don't know if your organization has a online file service, Google Cloud or a Dropbox or something, but somebody on the team should create a meeting file on their desktop and preserve the meeting documents. You want to have one place where you put the lobby roadmap form and those other forms that we're going to be talking about. Create a meeting file. And the reason you're creating a meeting file, this process is not meant to be once and done. You want to build a relationship with the legislator and with the legislator's staff. So you want to keep your notes about the meeting in one place. So the next time you talk to the legislator about that topic or another topic, you have those notes to refer to. And you can refresh their memory. Oh, we spoke to you in April about this, that sort of thing. Create a meeting file, preserve the meeting documents, keep your notes in there, and you will be able to build on each successive meeting as you work to create a relationship with the legislator. The participants conduct research. The research is simply, you want to find out where the legislator stands on your issue. That's fine. And they may be for it or against it, or they may be ignorant of it. But you're also looking for things that make you and your team members similar to rather than different from the legislator. Do you live in the same town as the legislator? Are you members of the same faith community? Did you go to the same high school? Does the legislator's children go to the same high school as your children or your grandchildren? Are you fans of the same sports team? Anything that makes you similar to the legislator. What about the legislator's spouse? Is he or she, what college did he or she go to? What was their major? Did any member on your team go to that same college, have the same major? Were you in the same industry? That sort of thing. You're looking for things that make you similar to rather than different from. And this is just to open up some conversation at the beginning of the meeting with the legislator on friendly terms, a little bit of chit chat before you get down to business. Before the meeting, you want to basically prepare the script. You want to think the meeting through. You want to work on your what brought me here stories. Now, the what brought me here stories are the heart of the meeting. They are those short, values-based stories on why this meeting is important to you. And the reason this is important, and the reason I know everybody has a what brought me here story, is, we live in a country where half the people that are eligible to vote register to vote. And of those 50% of people eligible to vote who do register to vote, in a presidential election, maybe 60% will vote. In an off-year election, 40%, 35, 40% will vote. In a primary, 17%, 25%. So we live in a country where most people don't even bother to vote. And I'm talking to a group of people who are interested in visiting their legislator to talk about legislative issues. So what percentage of the public do you think does that? Basically, we are not normal. If normal is what most people do, most people don't think about going to see their legislator and talking to the legislator. So we're not normal, and that's a good thing. There's some reason why you want to do this. There's some reason this issue is important to you, whatever the issue is. And that's the basis of your what brought me here story. The group, at that first preliminary meeting, you're going to create the ask. The ask is a simple statement of exactly what you want the legislator to do. We're here today to ask you to co-sponsor House Bill, blah, 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 blah. We're here today to ask you to vote for this bill. We're here today to ask you to ask your committee chair to give this bill a vote. A simple, direct request. Every meeting you have with your legislator is about one issue and one ask. Keep it simple. So you create the ask. You know what you're going to ask the legislator, and an ask can be, it's not 3 or 4 sentences. It's usually just one sentence. Most of them are 10 words or less. As simple, as direct, as straightforward, as unambiguous, as clear as you can make it. And then you want to have a debriefing agenda. You want to talk about what you're going to do after the meeting. Are you going to write a letter to the editor? Are you going to write an opinion piece for a newspaper? Are you going to have a social media post? Decide what you're going to do after the meeting. Before the meeting, decide what you're going to do after the meeting. So to prepare your what brought me here story. The what brought me here story frames the issue through personal experience, your personal experience. It identifies values, and it relates your values to the issue. And the reason we do this, the reason we have these values-based stories, is today you can argue about opinions. Today you can even argue about facts. But you cannot argue with values. Human values are human values. Love, respect, kindness, freedom, integrity, truthfulness. We all may have different paths to each of those values, but we all have those values. So that's why the What Brought Me Here story is a values-based story. And values connect you with the legislator and the staff. They make you similar to rather than different from. So what brought me here story. What brings you to this work? When and how did you become aware of the issue? Why is it important to you? These are all elements of the what brought me here story. They don't all have to be in your story, but they're there to prompt you to think about what your story is. Your key elements are, when I was in high school, there was a civics teacher who's taught us this. Something happened. I learned, I realized, and that's why this issue was so important to me. That's your what brought me here story. You want to write your what brought me here story. You want to share your what brought me here story with team members, and you want to get feedback. So I'm going to give you an example of a what brought me here. This is a what brought me here story that I use when I'm talking to legislators about redistricting reform. And I tell them that in 1969, I was a 19-year-old combat infantryman in South Vietnam, and I saw young men die for this country. And I cannot tell you what they may have thought that sacrifice was for, but I can guarantee you that not one of them died so that politicians could draw district lines to favor one party or another. That is my what brought me here story. It is short, it's to the point, and no one has ever given me an argument about that story. You can't argue with values. So you write the story, you share your story, you request feedback. Your ask is related to where the legislator stands on an issue. Now, legislators are, just as we are, complex people, and very seldom are they 100% for or 100% against something. And there are multiple positions a legislator can have. And these are 5 positions that I think cover the spectrum fairly well. Your legislator could be a leader against your ask, what you're trying to get done. They could be merely against it, not really a leader, but they don't like it. Perhaps they're neutral or undecided or ignorant of the topic. And then they might be for it, but not really working hard to that end. They're not a prime sponsor of the bill. They may co-sponsor it or something. And then you're going to have your prime sponsors, the people who are leaders for what you're going for. Your ask is going to be based on where your legislator is on the spectrum. And it's very important to know that lobbying is not an on-off switch. We are not going to go into a legislator and by the dint of our logic and the strength of our arguments, take someone who is dead set against what we want to do and make them gung-ho about what we want to do. That is not going to happen. But if you can take somebody who is stridently opposed to what you want to do and get them to be less strident, that's a victory. If you can get them to say, well, there is one part of the bill I do like, that's a victory. If you get somebody who is against what you want to do, but not a leadership against it, and get them to see a couple good points about your bill, that's a victory. And if you can take somebody who is neutral or uninformed about your bill and move them to be a little more interested in it and see the value of some aspects of it, that's a win. If you take somebody who is for it and get them to do something, a press release or a statement in their newsletter in support of what you're trying to do, that's a victory. And then if you're talking to someone who is a ardent fan of what you're trying to do and they're a leader, you ask them what you can do to help them move the process forward. That is what the lobbying is. So before the meeting, you prepare the ask, and your ask is a clear statement, what you want the legislator to do. It's related to the legislator's status, legislator's position on the issue, and the legislation status. The legislation status was it just introduced and referred to committee? Is it on the table? Has it been voted out of committee and it's on the table in the chamber? Is it up for a vote in the chamber? So your ask is, legislation just introduced, you may be asking for co-sponsor. Please co-sponsor the bill. If the bill has been in committee for a week or two, you may ask the member of the committee, if that's your legislator, they're on the same committee where the bill is, you may want them to ask the chair to have a hearing on the bill. If they're not on the committee, you may want them to contact members of the committee of the same party and ask them to get a hearing on the bill. So your ask is related to legislation status. If it's up for a vote, you want to lobby a vote in support of it. And it's related to your legislator's position. If you get somebody who is ardently opposed to what you want to do, asking them to be a co-sponsor is not going to be a very productive meeting. But if you ask them, what is it about the bill that you like? Is there anything about the bill that you like? Is there some way that the bill could be improved? That information is good to have. And your ask becomes part of the leave behind document. And that's one of the handouts we circulated earlier. Okay, so you want to practice, practice, practice. You want to brainstorm questions and answers. What questions might the legislator ask? And if they do ask it, who's going to respond? Who's going to research that question, get an answer for that? You want to practice your what brought me here stories. You want to practice the ask. You want to review the meeting flow. During the meeting, you want to arrive early, get there maybe 15 minutes early, go over the meeting outside the office, and then walk in. When you get into the meeting, when the legislator or the staff member arrives, you want to thank the legislator or staff member. The captain confirms the time at the meeting, and this is very important. The meeting may be scheduled for a half an hour, but legislators' schedules are flexible, and they may come into the meeting and say, I'm sorry, I only can give you 15 minutes today. So if you realize that going in, you will have spoken in preparing for the meeting. You decide, okay, if the meeting is cut short, we're going to have one what brought me here story rather than two, and you're going to know which one that is. Captain introduces the team members. The note taker presents the contact sheet, ask sheet to the legislator, and that's one of the handouts, the template for that. The captain states the ask. And then the captain transitions to the what brought me here stories. And the transition is simply something, and I believe Michelle has something she wants to say on this issue. Michelle, and then Michelle tells her what brought me her story. And at the end, she may say, and Laura wants to say something about this as well. And then Laura tells her story. And then you transition after 3 stories, you transition back to the captain, who repeats the ask and says something along the lines of, well, that's why this issue is important to us. We'd like to have your reaction. And then everybody gets comfortable with silence and listens carefully to the response. Listen carefully to the response. Don't correct, don't argue. Let the legislator lay out his or her position. And then the captain moderates responses. And this part of the meeting typically becomes, it's organic. It's a natural conversation, a give and take. And you're not arguing, you're trying to understand each other. It's not an argument. After a while, you repeat the ask, you distribute the leave behind, you discuss follow-up. It's our understanding that you want us to get information on point A, point B, and we'll do that. We'll get that information to you in 3 days. Then you want to thank the legislator. And then you want to have a photo, if it's an in-person meeting, or a screenshot of everyone, if it's an online meeting. And that's for social media, so you can advertise that you've done it. And it's a nice thing to do for the legislator. After the meeting, you leave in silence. You don't start talking about the meeting until you're out of the building. You go to a cafe where you're sure there's no employees of the legislator at the cafe, so you can talk, and you gather to review and revise your notes. Use a debrief document to discuss how things went, list the unanswered legislators' questions, talk about what worked, what you'd like to improve in the next meeting, and then talk about who does what when and follow up. You want to have a debriefing report, and that's one of the forms that you received, and I'll make available at the end of the session. The debriefing report, and you want to keep that in that file that I talked about. Are you going to have a press release, a letter to the editor? Are you going to have a social media post? Who does that? When they're going to do it? You decide that after the meeting. A thank you note. Now, of course, you're going to follow up with an email to thank them for everything, but I think it's a nice thing to do to send by mail a thank you note to the legislator. I would do it on a postcard. If it's an actual note in an envelope, it'll take a long time to get there, but you can do it on a nice postcard. In the email, you want to have the responses to questions. So this is the whole process. You form the teams. You get 3 to 5 people who want to meet. You define your roles. You schedule the meeting. You research the legislator, looking for things that make you similar to rather than different from. You prepare your what brought me here stories. You prepare the ask. You rehearse. You meet. You debrief. Put that in the meeting document file. And you rinse and repeat, because this process is meant to build a relationship with the legislator. So, do we have any questions?
I'd like to ask a question.
Great.
And that is, if we do all the steps that you have identified,
Mm-hmm.
and there are unspoken things from the legislator's point of view, and basically what he's not saying is relevant, and that is like, I don't want to lose my job, so I'm listening to my boss. So I'm not going to commit to you, even though I may agree with what you're saying, because my boss does not agree with what you're saying. How do you handle that? I mean, he's basically telling you, I've got a wife and kids, and I don't want to lose this job. I don't want to lose funding for my staff. I don't want to lose what I have. So, which in a political arena can all be taken away from him. I mean,
Yes.
financial support for his next campaign can disappear.
Yeah.
So, anyway, would you talk a little bit about those concerns?
Yes, when you have, and I have actually a legislator, I had a chair of a committee tell me, I'm not in charge. Yeah, that's why they're built. A chair of committee, tell me, I'm not in charge. So I
But he was
understand.
being honest.
Yeah, and you thank them for their honesty, and you commiserate with them. But that's got to be difficult. Here you are, you're an elected representative, and you really can't do the job you want to do. I sympathize with you, I understand, and there's no point in being here at all. Well, there's no point in, you can't do any good at all if you're not here. So I understand wanting to stay. What can we do? What is your boss's, what is leadership's, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about party leadership. What is your leadership's main objections to this? How can we best address that? Who has influence with your leader? Commiserate with them and try to strategize on how to get that weight off of the legislator's back. What can we do to help you? Who else should we be talking to? Who in your party has decided they're not going to run next year, or next year? And can we use them as an ally? Things like that. Just try to work through. It's not like, okay, I guess nothing can be done. They're still there. They can still talk to others. They maybe can't be as open and as public as we'd like them to be. Do not berate them and say something like, what's the matter with you? You're supposed to be my legislator, not leadership's legislator, you know. They know that. It is likely that they are just as disappointed in that situation as we are. It is a tough job. We have legislators that support us, but have to be sly and careful about how they support us. And just see if you can help them do that. But that whole thing about let us know if there's somebody in your party you think might be friendly to this, who you get a hint, or when you find out there's somebody who might be open to this, who isn't running again, you know, introduce us, you know, let us know who that is, how we can help, how we can reach out to that person. And you know, there's not much else you can do. The good news is you have someone who's being very honest and very vulnerable talking to you, so that's good. And just think in terms of how can we help you be the legislator you want to be. Does that any help at all?
Yes, but I also think that it's a matter of it's a matter of finances. If you are independently wealthy, you can tell somebody, go away,
Yeah,
I'll fund
I
my
don't
own
use it.
office,
Right.
you know, whatever. But the same issue that I just spoke about is also present at the congressional level. And we see it all the time. People don't stand up to feckless leaders. And there is nothing that we as their constituents can really do. If we try to vote them out of office, we probably will just get worse people. So it's a problem that I see not just at a state level, but I also see it at all levels of government, whether it's municipal or state or federal. And I think that it is the fact that people are concerned about finances and jobs and so forth. If you are not independently wealthy, you are beholden not only to the leaders in your particular organization. I mean, I think of many people at the congressional level that, you know, it's almost like they're trying to kiss somebody's butt. And yet you know them to be someone who actually used to have principles.
Yeah,
It's a
difficult question,
conundrum
but
for our democracy.
that's true. But you know, you have to talk to them. You have to build a relationship. You have to keep trying. If what's the alternative? There is no fix for someone who is cowering and afraid to take any action. There's no fix for that. But you can commiserate. You can try to get them to have more of a backbone, to try to get them to get, eventually they're going to get fed up. They're going to be miserable. They're going to get fed up. You got to keep trying. You can't assume, and I've spoken with people, you know, congressional people, with FCNL. I'm involved with them, and I've spoken with, you know, senators and FCNL, and my congressperson is, there couldn't be a bigger divide politically between where he is and where I am. We go in, we have a pleasant conversation, and maybe he's not going to do anything I tell him to do, but he knows I'm out there, and he knows people who think like I do are out here, and he knows we vote. And the conversation is respect. They're getting their news on issues that are important to us. They're getting their take on those issues from their legislative seniors, their legislative bosses, the party bosses. They don't get to hear our point of view unless we bring it to them. We have to bring our point of view. You can't have a representative democracy if we don't go and talk to them.
I agree with you totally. That's why I keep working
And
in this, because you have to keep showing up.
have to keep showing up, but think in terms of the next time you talk to that legislator, how can I help you? How do we, gee, this is, you want to represent me, you really do want to represent, but you have this political problem with the political boss, and just see if you can at least you let him or her know that you understand they're in a difficult position. Because it's not easy to run for office. It is not easy
No,
to run for office.
and I think one of the problems that I foresee is getting worse and worse and worse is that only the wealthy, are running for office, and they are not representing the lower or the middle class. I
No,
mean, there is a class divide that
yes,
didn't exist, I would say in the 1930s. It just seems like it has gotten so much worse.
well, if you go back to the 1920s, the
That's why I said 30s.
30s, yeah. We had that depression, and everything because of what went before just went to hell. It almost killed capitalism, and basically progressive policy saved capitalism.
Yes. Yeah, the wealthy became poor, and all of a sudden they added.
They commiserated.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just keep meeting with them. Have some empathy for somebody in that position. They, running for office, you got to get all those signatures, and you got to go knocking on doors, and you got to raise money, and you got to go to events, and it's not easy to do. And then and if they're a rookie, they get to Harrisburg, and they can't do what they wanted to do. They ran for a reason. They had something they wanted to do, and there's some dolts up there that are just in it for the cushy job. I know that. But I'm telling you, there are sincere and decent men and women up there who are shocked when they finally get to Harrisburg and they find out they cannot represent their people. And the key problem in that whole process are the rules for each legislative session. They're voted on at the beginning of the legislative session, and they give entirely too much power to the leadership. Leadership picks the committee chairs. Leaderships are going to pick committee chairs. They're going to do what they want. So the committee chairs won't schedule bills the leaders don't want to have heard. And unless the rules allow more collaboration, we're going to have rules that promote the hyper partisanship that we have now. The rules are basically a winner take all. No Democratic bills go through if the Republicans are in charge of the committee. No Republican bills go through if the Democrats are in charge of the committee. That's not a representational democracy. That's not the way it's supposed to work. You're not supposed to punish the other party. You're supposed to work with the other party to govern, and they're more interested in party power than governance. These are tough problems. These are difficult problems. My approach is to basically act as if they're decent and normal and want to do the right thing despite all the evidence to the contrary. You act as if they're okay, you're going to have an entirely different conversation with them. And it's going to change the relationship. If you go at them and try to straighten their butts out and tell them what for, that's going nowhere. Nobody likes to be yelled at. They're not going to listen. They're going to close off. But if you work with them, and if you're empathetic, and if you understand their problems, that's got to be miserable. You can't do what you want to do because of some boss, and I'm not going to have an office unless I do what they tell me to do. Most people don't even realize the legislators don't hire their own staff. The caucuses hire their staff. Did you know that in Harrisburg, there are two printers? One printer prints Democratic bills, and another printer prints Republican bills. There are two IT departments, one IT department for the Republican legislator, and one IT department for the Democratic legislator. Now, what those are paid, those are political spoils, jobs that are paid for by the public, not the parties. The public pays that. And these are people, all of whom run for office, talking about inefficiency in government. We got to stop that. We got to fix that. Well, how about having one publisher? How about having one IT department? Do you need two heads of IT? Do you need two? No. So there are deep, severe problems, but you just got to keep knocking on doors. Got to keep talking to them. They got to know we're here. They got to know we're watching. They got to know we care. Because the less we do that, the more they get away with.
I do agree with everything you just said. It's why we've got to show up in their face.
Right.
Because if we don't keep showing up, they will just ignore their constituents even more.
Yeah. But show up with a smile. Act as if. Just be pleasant. And I got to believe it's going to help eventually. It can't. We know, Fair Districts knows, and League of Women Voters knows, those that have been doing lobbying and stuff, there are a lot of frustrated legislators who don't like the rules any more than we do. And that dam is going to burst someday. It is going to burst someday. So we just got to make little cracks.
It just kind of amazes me that there are some states that are much more effective than Pennsylvania is. And, and it's party politics. If you agree to work together to do something good for your constituents, you may not get everything that you want, but you get something accomplished. Whereas in this state, very little of anything worthwhile gets accomplished.
Yeah, there are over 5,000 bills introduced in every 2-year session, and some 280 get passed. That is less than 7%. So 93% of bills go nowhere. 75% of those 5,000 bills, 4,800, 5,000, 75% of those bills die in committee without ever being scheduled for a conversation. Those are bills that are not debated and found wanting and then trashed. Those are bills that are ignored. And I'm not suggesting that of the 4,000, there are scores and scores of positive legislative, serious legislative ideas. There's a lot of stupid things going on. 4,000 bills in a 2-year session is crazy. That's just absolutely crazy. But I am insisting that every 2-year session, among those 4,000 bills, there are dozens that are important to the people of Pennsylvania that are ignored.
I agree.
Yeah, so.
It's one of the things that keeps me up at night.
Well, I hope you get a chance to nap during the day. Any other questions?
Tommy, when you are going in to see your legislator and he is a person, that they are a person that with whom you disagree, you're still taking your whole team, right, and you have your process laid out.
Right. Yeah. We do, and it works fine. It works fine. I mean, a lot of people, this process takes the intimidation out of meeting with legislators. A lot of people think, oh, what do I know? The legislator knows so much. They're up there. They know what's going on. Those are people who have not spoken to legislators. I mean, if you have an attitude, I am telling you that if you have a bill or an issue that you are concerned about, and you do your research on that bill, and you talk to any legislator, unless that bill is in that legislator's committee, and sometimes even if it is in that legislative committee, you will know more than that legislator will. You will know more than the legislator will. You have better information, and you have information that the legislator doesn't have access to, because the legislator is getting his or her information typically from leadership. Unless it's a bill they care about, they're getting their information from leadership. I mean, I can't tell you how many stories I've heard about legislators being on the floor saying, oh, I forgot what leadership wanted me to vote in this bill. How am I supposed to vote? I mean, oh, that bill? What are we supposed to do on this one?